Silo 17 is a graveyard, Silo 18 is on the brink of chaos, and Solo is hiding a deadly secret. Because who cut Juliet's rope in the first episode if Solo never made it as far as the bridge? We learned a lot of things this episode. We even learned that the outside world is semi-habitable. So let's break it all down. The first thing we learn is the name of the man that Juliet met at the end of episode 1, the one who threatened to kill her. And I believe he would have killed her too because of the 2 bodies that we saw by the door, but we're gonna get into those bodies a little later. We learned that this man's name is Solo, and he has been in this silo by himself for over 25 years. The reason we know it's been over 25 years is because later in the episode, when Bernard was talking to Judge Meadows, he told Meadows that Silo 17 has been dead from the time before she was even his shadow. And back in episode 2, we learned that Judge Meadows was his shadow over 25 years ago. Being in the silo for over 25 years, you can start to understand why Solo's mind is warped. One minute he's telling Juliet he can't open the door, he's never been outside. And the next he's opening the door and leaving food for her, showing us that he has a couple of screws loose. He has been by himself for 25 years and he's been hallucinating people. People have come here and tried to kill him. And Russell, who was head of IT of Silo 17, the man the rebels were looking for in the first episode, he gave Solo strict instructions to stay inside the server room, to not come out the server room and jeopardize the servers of the silo. We see that the technology inside the server rooms are way more advanced than anyone in the silo has access to except for the head of IT. And there may be something deeper inside of there. I think there's communication networks between them. They have access to supercomputers. Bernard knows exactly what happened to 17 even before Juliet got there. Solo also mentions that they use advanced computers. That's how they're able to create the images in the helmet. So the servers aren't just to keep the silo running. There's information and technology that could help everybody, which explains why some people want inside of it and why the Order doesn't want anyone to have access to it. Kind of like they're hoarding all the power for themselves, which is why I think you should hit the subscribe button so we can get to the bottom of this. Because whatever's going on with the silos is bigger than we think. We find out from Solo that there are 50 silos in this area. He's in Silo 17, so he's trying to figure out which silo Juliet comes from. We know she's from Silo 18 because of Bernard's keychain. That means before Silo 17 rebelled, there were over 500,000 people living in these silos. If you had all 10,000 people in each silo, that's 500,000 people. We also learned why Silo 17 rebelled and went outside. And the reason they did it is for the exact same reason that Juliet's silo, Silo 18, is currently rebelling. Someone in Silo 17 named Ron Tucker went outside and he refused to clean just like Juliet did, and he walked away. The only thing he did differently than Juliet was write the words lies on the camera. And that was the catalyst to start the rebellion that we saw in the flashback of the first episode. And this whole thing is repeating itself for Juliet's silo, Silo 18. Because Juliet walked away, that became the catalyst for her silo to rebel as well. The 2 rebellions are almost mirrors of each other. We even see graffiti of Ron Tucker lives on the walls of Silo 17, similar to the graffiti of Juliet lives that's been spotted throughout 18, which is why Teddy got arrested in the beginning. But to me, the most interesting thing we learned and that raised the most questions was what Solo said about the radiation. He said when the people went outside, they were able to survive outside without any radiation suit or protection, showing us that the outside atmosphere was somewhat breathable. But then there was a dust that came by and that killed everybody. To me, that shows outside is starting to slowly become more habitable. However, because of these random radiation storms, it's not completely safe to be outside, which could also explain why Solo is able to open the door and come outside, even before Juliet shut the main door of 17. What it looks like to me is if you're able to get behind airtight doors before the radiation storm hits, you're able to survive, which could explain where the 2 bodies by the door came from, and why I think there's somebody else in the silo with the 2 of them. But we're gonna get into that later. Let's shift to Silo 18 real quick, because I think Bernard is aware of what's going on and he knows Juliet's alive. Even though he told Judge Meadows that he thinks she's dead, he also lied to her about Juliet wanting to go outside. Maybe this is a way for him to consolidate power and it's all written in the Order. Because we see Bernard is following the Order to the T, even though Judge Meadows had a talk with him and tried to explain, let's handle what's going on in the silo differently as to not cause a rebellion. But Bernard is sticking to the Order. It makes me wonder his motives. Is he sticking by the Order because he knows he'll survive? The same way that Solo's able to survive inside the silo by himself? It seems to me that there might be a provision in the Order saying, if all else fails, lock somebody in the silo until further notice. Because Bernard is purposely causing chaos and riling up the rebellion by targeting the rebels, arresting Teddy, trying to get the silo to turn against the Down Deep, the same way Silo 17 did, and even having Sims use Patrick Kennedy to stoke the riots to a deadly level. Even though all this is laid out in the Order, I think it's also a secret move to consolidate his power just because he knows he has a failsafe, which is causing Judge Meadows to look at him differently, especially when Meadows starts talking to Billings and they learn more about Juliet's cleaning. Billings is another person to look out for. Ever since he's found the guidebook last season, I feel like he's been on the fence, and with Bernard pushing, I feel like he's pushing Billings and Judge Meadows towards the rebellion. especially now that she knows Bernard lied about Juliet wanting to clean. I said this in my last video and I'll say it again. Juliet walking over that hill sparked a hope inside of everybody. We see this with Meadows throughout the episodes as she's watching movies. She wants to go outside, even down to her explanation as to what causes the syndrome. We learned that the syndrome isn't caused by anything hereditary or genetic. It's the human response to being confined in a silo where you can't walk more than 200 feet in a straight line, which explains why she wants to go outside and be free. I'm starting to think that she may join Shirley's revolution, even though Shirley's revolution isn't all that cohesive. Because Bernard had Teddy arrested for the graffiti, that angered Shirley, especially since he's from Mechanical and Bernard is purposely pitting the rest of the silo against Mechanical, which I think is a stupid idea by the order in the first place. Mechanical is in charge of the safety and the livelihood of the silo. While everyone thinks their role is important, Mechanical has the most important role. Like Shirley suggested last episode, they could shut down the generators, and we saw what happened with Silo 17. With the generators offline, everything flooded and pretty much everyone in the silo died. I think Bernard knows this because he knows Silo 17 went down, which is why he had Sims make Patrick Kennedy stoke the rebellion. I want to talk about just how manipulative Sims and Bernard are. Sims promised Patrick Kennedy a medication that could erase his memories. That medication was death. That, like, to me, I think that's what it was. It was straight up death. He knew Patrick Kennedy was going to die because he's the one who hired the goons. And as soon as that Molotov went off, the first thing that goon that Sims hired did was shoot Patrick Kennedy and then shoot Cooper. But that's where he messed up at. Because by shooting Cooper, he made Cooper a martyr, and now that has Knox joining the rebellion. It's one thing having Shirley lead the rebellion. She's a hothead and she doesn't have a plan. But someone like Knox, who's respected, people will follow him, and he has access to weapons. The rebellion would have been doomed if it was just Shirley. Bernard could have handled that. But now that Knox is involved, everything changes. And not just with Knox's involvement. Juliet's father is also showing signs of rebellion. Even though there's rebellion still going on in the silo, Bernard still wants to maintain control. So he still has Juliet's father not removing birth control from certain problematic people. In this episode, it's Phoebe Wells. I don't know if it's hubris or not, but Bernard is still behaving like it's business as usual, reaching out to Juliet's father, thinking that he's going to help. However, because he's grieving and he thinks Juliet's dead and he feels like he let her down, instead of following the silo's orders, his act of rebellion is to remove Phoebe Wells' birth control, allowing her to have kids. And that's how rebellions start. You have the lower class rising up, and now you have people in the upper levels, Judge Meadows, Juliet's dad, also looking at Bernard sideways and rising up. All this because he's following the order to the T, and it could have been avoided had he listened to Judge Meadows. The only problem is we know the revolution leads straight to death, which is why Juliet is essentially in a race against the clock. Juliet tells Solo she needs to find a way to get back to her silo ASAP in order to stop them from coming outside. She has to warn them after she found out what happened with Ron Tucker. But because Silo 17 is pretty much flooded all the way to the top, Juliet doesn't have access to get the suits. However, they come up with a plan to get firefighter suits just one level below. Even though you have to go underwater, you don't have to dive too deep. However, initially Solo refuses to come out because he's traumatized. And let's talk about his trauma for just a second, because I think his paranoia is justified. There may be someone else in this silo. Going by the 2 dead bodies on the floor shows us that those bodies are a lot more recent than the people of the silo. The people of Silo 17 are skin and bones and wasted. These bodies are still decomposing, which I think means one of 2 things. Either those people stayed inside the silo and didn't go outside, or those people came from other silos. We saw in the episode that people were trying to get inside the bunker. They tried to blow up the door. They even wrote graffiti on the wall directly in front of Solo's door, saying that we will get you sooner or later. Those 2 people may have died. However, remember back in the first episode when Juliet was trying to swing across to the server room and her rope got cut by somebody? It's not Solo, because we learned that Solo hasn't been that far out in over 25 years as far as the bridge. So that means he never went up. He even tells Juliet he wants to go up. Whoever cut Juliet's ropes came from the floor above. Throughout this episode as well as the first episode, there always seems to be someone watching Juliet. I think someone wants access to that server room and they're just waiting, biding their time for Solo to come out. And now that Juliet convinced him to come out, I feel like they're gonna get him. But guys, that's just my thoughts on Silo. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.